This is the Skaven Screaming Bell, and for years it's been one of the big centerpiece models in the Skaven range. It features a magical rat man called the Grey Seer, surfing on a big bell full of evil magic. What's not to love? Like many Games Workshop kits, it has two different optional builds that you can build from the contents of the box, which means you can either build a Screaming Bell, or you can build the other option, a Plague Furnace. Now what this means is that whichever option you choose, you have the important parts left over to build the other one if you just use a little bit of elbow grease and ingenuity. So that's what I'm going to do here today. Okay, so the real workhorse of this project is going to be balsa wood. You can buy it in these big strips at a craft store like Michael's, and it's really easy to work with because it's quite soft. You can easily cut it with a sharp knife, and it also splits well along the grain. Because it's so soft, it takes texture really well too. With a mechanical pencil, I can press into it, leaving deep impressions that look like the gaps between planks of wood. By scoring the wood with the back of my X-Acto knife, I'm able to create a nice deep wood grain texture. Because it's so soft, I can easily cut into the wood to make the planks look like they're uneven lengths as well, adding some nice detail. And just like that, that's how you make a little platform. I used this method to make a larger platform too, and my original plan was to have this smaller platform suspended above the larger on two large upright columns. The big plague sensor bit from the kit will be suspended in between these two uprights. Now on the official model, the Screaming Bell or Plague Furnace, depending on which one you choose to build, it's suspended from this bit of stone arch that's lashed to the frame of the rest of the vehicle. I mean, this is pretty cool. It looks like they just ripped a stone arch off a building and attached it to the vehicle. But the more you think about it, the less cool it becomes in a way. I mean, first of all, how on earth did they pull an arch off a building intact? That's hard. Second of all, it would make this whole thing top heavy in the extreme. Like this thing could go over a pebble and it would tip over. And lastly, it's such a distinct looking bit of kit that if I wanted to have both the Plague Furnace and a Screaming Bell in my army, I would have to believe that two arches were ripped off a building and lashed up this way. It's all just a bit much. So building my own version, I want to make something unique for my army that'll look great. Now one thing that is important to me though is to try to have my creation look like it was made in the same style with the same technology. So as I build it, I'm going to keep that in mind. I add 3 wooden axles to the bottom of my main platform, making sure the center axle sticks out a little bit to accommodate the upright columns I'll be adding, which will slot into this little notch I created for them. I also added another cross beam in the same place to give it a reinforced look and also to add more surface area for when I glue the uprights on. Of course, before gluing, I use the knife to add wood grain texture, as this will be nearly impossible to add once it's assembled. To assemble it, I use wood glue, since it absorbs really well into the balsa wood and gives a strong bond, and then I also add a little bit of a reinforcing beam in the corner. I've added some lengths of wooden dowel to hang my Plague Furnace, which I test to make sure fits well before I glue it all together. And with my basic shape done, I add some large supporting beams to keep this thing from looking like it would collapse when it swings. I add some smaller ones on the front, angling them inward a bit to keep them from landing off the platform. It also adds a bit of style and aerodynamics to this vehicle. We wouldn't want this thing to be impractical after all. I wanted there to be a little standing area up at the front, but I also wanted a different silhouette from the GW version, so I made some upward angled guardrail type things. I think these also emphasize the path of the big swinging ball as well. And looking back at the Screaming Bell, I looked for some more stylistic cues to go from, and I realized I needed some small support beams to add complexity and detail to the look of the woodwork. So I added these bad boys. I also added a little off-center raised platform at the back so the plague monks who pull the pulley system that swings this thing can stand on there and be out of the path of the Plague Furnace as it swings. Time to add some cool style to this thing. Using little bits of wood, I built a Skaven symbol, this little triangle they have, which is apparently the symbol of the 3-horned rat. Here's how it's looking so far. Hell yeah. Little dudes will stand on the back there. Nice. Alright, let's make some wheels. Again, we're going to use the balsa wood, tracing some circles using coins and lids and things. Cut those out with a knife, and then use the natural grain of the wood to add some thick planks. I use the back of the knife for wood grain detail again. Next, I cut a strip of cardboard a little bit thicker than the wheel to make the iron rim that goes around the outside, and then I glue that in place with some super glue. The wheels on the original kit have tons of cool metal details that add a real Skaven-y flavor. Oy. I just gagged a little bit thinking about what the flavor of Skaven would be. Anyways, I cut little bits of plastic art and glue them on to add those detail bits. While I work on this, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I've always thought that hobby time is great for your mental health, but sometimes you need somebody to talk to. I really want all of you guys to thrive, and I know from personal experience that sometimes we're going through things that just aren't right to discuss with friends and family. The feeling of not wanting to burden those around you with your problems or worrying about being judged is sometimes a big barrier that stops people from getting the help they need. So talking to a licensed professional is a good option. BetterHelp will connect you with a therapist who's trained to give you helpful, unbiased advice. To get started, go to their site. You can use my link betterhelp.com/ericshobbyworkshop. You answer a few questions and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with issues just like yours. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started right away. You can do it all from your phone or computer too, via video chat, messaging, or phone call, whatever is most comfortable for you. Visit betterhelp.com/ericshobbyworkshop or choose Eric's Hobby Workshop during sign up and they'll give you a special discount code on your first month. Take care of yourselves, guys. Thanks BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Now back to the build. I painstakingly cut some little circles to act as the boss in the center of the wheels too. When that's all done, I had some little rivets that I casted in Milliput to get the details absolutely sizzling. Back on the main chassis, I drilled some holes into the axle supports and added some plastic tubing to act as the mounts for the wheels. I also felt like the design was lacking a bit of chaotic style, so I added another platform for another crazy little ratman to stand on. Hell yeah. Now speaking of crazy little ratmen, the time has come to put some attention to who's going to be on this little vehicle driving it into battle. The basic kit comes with a Plague Priest, who's a pretty cool model, but he has this weird stiff hood that I wasn't a huge fan of, so I clipped that off and I sculpted a new droopier hood that shows more of his face with some green stuff. I also swapped out his left hand to be holding a book from the Plague Monk kit. I think that looks pretty cool. I saw somebody else do this online, so full credit to them, although I don't remember their username or anything. Sorry. I also made good use of the new Skabbix Plague Pack kit, which is an Underworlds gang full of great Skaven models done in the modern style that, to be perfectly honest, make the old Skaven Plague Monks look pretty beat by comparison. I have 2 copies of this kit, which helped me with my reluctance to cut it up. This guy's pretty cool. He's got a plague sensor, but I figured by cutting off his hands I could give him a whole new vibe. I replaced one of his hands with a scroll from the Plague Monk kit, then realized the little pipe he's standing on makes no sense on the platform I want him on, so I cut that off too. For his right hand I gave him a hand that was once carrying a spear, and I turned it into some sort of torch thing by adding a bit clipped off the top banner from another Skaven kit. I don't remember which kit it's from, maybe Clan Rats, I don't know. Yeah, that's awesome. Now, with 1 foot raised, this little dude needed a tactical rock or something. And what would be more fitting of a tactical rock for a ratman than a big chunk of warpstone, the magical stone that Skaven covet above all things. So I took a lump of leftover green stuff, and with a sharp knife I cut facets into the blob, making a jagged nugget of warpstone that looks the part completely. Then I glued my dude's little foot onto it, and I could feel his excitement as I did it. Hell yeah, he's gonna go up here. Looks sick as hell. Nice. Back on the main piece, I cut up some more thin bits of plasticard to make some brackets and connectors that I put all over the model in places I felt like needed it. I added a bunch of rivets to those as well to add some fine little detail. I used some extra thin plasticard to make some raggedy banner bits that would hang from the 2 main columns. I particularly like this detail because it echoes the weird little CVS receipts that the Plague Monks are all carrying on sticks, and it ties my army together nicely. I also added a little skull from the Storm Vermin kit over here. On the front of the model, I glued a bunch of nasty blades cut from Storm Vermin halberds to the front bumper, just so this thing looks extra nasty. Now, it might just be my opinion, but I think the Games Workshop kit is a little bit too busy. There's kind of too much detail on it. So at this point, I was actually a little bit restrained and didn't go overboard emptying my bits box on this thing. You can let me know when it's done if you think I got the level of detail right. Now for the little guys pulling on the pulley that come default from the Games Workshop kit, I had to make an extension of the mechanism they were pulling on so that they all lined up. I left this bit able to slot in, but not be attached for ease of painting. This actually worked out pretty well. It was finally time to attach the wheels, which I did with a bit of gel superglue. To my chagrin, I noticed the center wheels were a millimeter or so off the ground, but I imagine that has to do with the flex of this contraption as the huge flaming sensor swings back and forth. You see these floating wheels on semi-truck trailers sometimes when they're not loaded. I think it works. These wheels would be touching the ground if the sensor was in the middle of a downswing, I think. Now, I was a bit nervous about the durability of this whole thing because balsa wood is so very soft that you can easily snap it with your hands. So I used some extra thin super glue to absolutely super soak this hoe and try to add some durability. There's some sort of thermic reaction from this stuff, I think, and you can sometimes see it get hot and little wisps of what might be smoke come off of it. It's very gnarly. I was ready with my fire extinguisher and a cup of water in case I needed to get some incredible footage for the blooper reel. But alas, it did not spontaneously combust. The superglue thing actually seemed to work really well. Huh. Sometimes you just get lucky, I guess. Okay, time to paint this bad boy. In case you guys didn't know, I am sponsored by Army Painter and I'm a member of the Army Painter factory team. So all the paints I'm going to be using will be Army Painter, and if you look in the bottom left corner of the screen, you'll see exactly which ones I used. So I took this thing outside to my garage and I primed it black, and then I hit it with a coat of brown paint, mostly from above. Now with the whole thing painted brown, this thing looks so sick already. It really ties the pieces together, and this is my favorite stage of any project. With a soft dry brush, I hit all the wood areas with the tan color, bringing out some of that wood detail. I will say I wish I'd added a bit more wood grain to some parts beforehand, specifically those uprights. I think the glue may have filled in a tiny bit, but it still looks pretty awesome, so I won't sweat it too much. Next I hit all the iron parts with a very dark gray, almost black, applied very thin. A bit of the brown shows through and it gives a lovely weathered iron look with just one coat. The dark iron contrasts nicely with that tan on the wood too. Lovely. I layer on some tan on those parchment bits too, and while it was still wet I added some chunky off-white highlights to accentuate those lovely ripples and make them look a little bit more interesting. With a vibrant green I hit the warpstone areas, being reasonably careful to avoid the metal of the ball cage. I wonder if I can say ball cage without getting age restricted. Maybe I shouldn't draw too much attention to it. Anyways, I painted the bottom of all that smoke green as well. Now this piece I think is an insanely intimidating piece to paint, so I'm just going to go right at it and see what happens. While it's still wet, I kept adding light gray to my green, adding more and more gray to the top of the volumes of the smoke as I worked my way upwards. At the top of the smoke, I add some almost pure white. Damn, I think that looks pretty decent to be honest. And maybe I should have done this earlier, but at this stage I dry brush a bit of gunmetal metallic on there too. That looks nice. For the warpstone bits in the ball cage, I'm going to try a rudimentary glow effect here. So I start by applying some watered down white paint, sinking it into the deepest crevices. With that dry, I add a vibrant light green, also very thin to sink into those cracks. With that dry, I apply some of the mid-green again on the raised areas. It's a pretty cool effect, I think. To paint the Skaven themselves, I start by painting their robes in a dirty greenish tan, then pick out the ropes, parchment, and bandages in a dark tan color. I paint all the exposed areas of the Ratmen's bodies with gray. You can see at this stage I'm using a giant brush and everything looks kinda terrible. A very wise art teacher once told me that your work doesn't need to look good at every stage in the process, and that's some of the best advice I've ever heard. This brush is totally blown out, as you can see, but it's good enough to put down some brown. I paint the stone and the flames green. Greenskin is honestly one of my favorite paints ever. Look at that juicy green. Anyways, I like to pick out the snout, ears, feet, and hands of my Skaven with flesh tone. I've never looked too closely at a real rat, but I don't think it matters much. It looks cool to me. Once again, I paint the base of the flames white because I'm going to try for a similar effect as I did on the swinging ball. So with my basic colors down, I start highlighting things, then push some contrast into the recesses with strong tone. It's only about here that I switch to a brush with a tip I can really control. This is when the painting really gets fun. I apply that bright electric lime to the base of the flames and then I blend that a little bit. I also slowly blend in a bit of black towards the tip of the flames to heighten the contrast but also to give it a dirty, smoky appearance. For the piece of warpstone, I highlighted the bottom corner of each of the stone's facets, then add shadow to the upper right corner, going almost to pure black. I highlight all the edges too and add a dot of bright white to some of the pointiest corners. I think it looks like the most delicious forbidden gusher. You know, maybe I've been playing with Ratmen for too long, but I'm starting to covet that sweet, sweet warpstone myself. Oh, and I forgot to paint the bracelets and bell. There they go. Hell yeah. Alright, let's put these guys on. Little guys on the back. This guy goes up here. This guy I actually painted separately off camera, but he's going to go under the big swinging thing, and possibly the worst place to stand on the whole model, but he loves it. So here it is. Hell yeah. This thing looks so awesome. I'm so proud of this thing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you like Skaven stuff, please share this video with your friends and let me know in the comments below. I've been chipping away at a whole army of these guys, and I'd love to show you guys more if the interest is there. Huge thank you to my patrons. If you guys join now, you can get a bunch of cool benefits, Discord access, behind the scenes vlogs, credit in the videos, and more. It's a huge help to the channel, and I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.